Welcome to the Feds, insiders bringing accountability, integrity, and reform to a broken bureaucracy. At Feds for Freedom, we value constructive dissent and healthy debate. The views and opinions shared in today's episode are those of the speaker alone and do not express the views or opinions of the U.S. government or any other employer.
Welcome back to this week's episode of The Feds. I am Stephanie Weidle. Well, it's a new year and it's going to be a wild ride on the freedom front. I can tell you there is so much happening behind the scenes, and the entire Feds for Freedom organization is on the front lines of pushing policies, laws, and public education to make sure COVID-like authoritarianism never happens again. We have a ways to go, but we have a plan, and with you, we are carrying out the plan. If you are not a part of a Feds for Freedom chapter in your state, please reach out to us at info@fedsforfreedom.org, and we will get you plugged into one. Those chapters are going to be super important in the coming year. Please visit our website and social medias to stay up to date with what's going on. I'll put all the links in the description below. If you enjoy this podcast and align with the mission of Feds for Freedom, please go to fedsforfreedom.org/donate and give a gift to protect the American public from government overreach. Retired Vice Admiral Dean Lee, a member of the Board of Advisors for STARS, joins me today. We discuss one simple question. Should vaccines be required for U.S. military personnel? Is it worth the cascade of events that we have witnessed over the past 4 years? Dean, thank you for joining me today.
First off, thank you for having me. So I spent 36 years with, a few months shy of 36 years in the Coast Guard. And I moved all over the Eastern Seaboard, served on the Gulf of now America, and also served on the Pacific for a short tour. And I ended up retiring as the Atlantic Area Commander based out of Portsmouth, Virginia. In that particular capacity, I had oversight of the entire Eastern Seaboard and the Caribbean. We also had vessels, I had ships over in the Arabian Gulf, and I spent, I had to go back and forth to Bahrain several times a year on that mission, but overall workforce, 21,000 people, and I'd give anything to go back and have that job again. Over.
Well, how did you respond as a retired military leader when COVID hit and you saw so many people being suspended from the military because they refused to take an experimental treatment?
Well, frankly, when COVID broke out, I had already been retired for 4 years. And I was one of them officers that wasn't paying that much attention to what was going on in my old service. I had moved on. I didn't even read the retiree newsletter. Whatever news I got from somebody sending me an email asking me, what do you think about X, with some article attached to it. So frankly, I really wasn't paying that much attention to it. But I got a call one day from a lawyer named Mike Rose. He's the attorney that represents STARS. Never had talked to him before, but he introduced himself and he said, "Look, I got your name off of the internet. Well, I see that you're affiliated with a conservative think tank." And I think at that time, I'm not sure, but I think he was referring to the Family Research Council, which I support. And he said, "I was wondering if you could help me out." And I said, "Well, sure, what you need?" And he said, "Well, I got 7 Coast Guard Academy cadets who are now my clients because they just got expelled from the Coast Guard Academy for refusing to take the COVID shot." And I said, "Well, okay, well, what do you want me to do about it? I'm retired. I don't have a voice in that anymore." And he says, "Well, I was hoping perhaps you could get somebody at Coast Guard headquarters to return my call because there's crickets on the line. Nobody will talk to me about why they expelled these." Well, I go, "Well, so what? I mean, what else? What are the other service academies doing with their cadets?" And he says, "That's just it. they're not disenrolling their cadets. They're putting them in a holding pattern, allowing them to continue their studies, stay in class, while they fight these injunctions in the court system. And I go, well, okay, that doesn't make a lot of sense. And I says, has anybody had an application for a religious exemption approved? And he says, no, nobody has to my knowledge. He says, and, you know, if you can just get somebody to return my call, or if you can talk them into just putting these cadets back in class, he says, I won't make any noise at all. But if you don't, I'm going to make your bosses, your former bosses, look foolish on this, because this is not good. The optics on this are not good. Well, of course, these are my colleagues who are now in charge, former shipmates that I used to work with, and I didn't want my organization nor them to look bad. And so I sent a private email to the then commandant, and it was just me to her, saying, hey, why don't you consider putting these kids back in class so that you're not drawing fire on your own position? Treat them like everybody else. And I didn't get a response. I waited a week, and after having no response, and I sent another email. This time I copied one of the other flag officers at headquarters on it, and says, hey, it's been a week now. This guy is chomping at the bit, wants to know if and when you're going to put those cadets back, and if not, why. And I've heard nothing back. And I said, he's going to make you look bad. We don't want that. So a few days go by, no answer, and finally I get a call from one of her underlings that said, hey, she's going to be, she's traveling right now, but she'll be back in town in a week or two, and she'll call you then. Well, I used to fly on the same executive jet that I knew she was on, and that thing's got communications. They can talk anywhere in the world at any time they want. I knew this was just a delaying tactic. And so I said, I'm not buying that. I'm gonna fight with you over this for those cadets. And so that became a battle in which I joined up with STARS, the folks there, some other like-minded retired generals and admirals, and collectively we took on this mission. And it expanded from 7 academy cadets into fighting for the 8,000 and some people on active duty from all of the service who had applied for religious exemptions and were denied them. And ultimately, after months of battling this, it got written into the NDAA as a result of those many contacts, those many connections, many podcasts, many news interviews, and the vaccine mandate was rescinded. That stopped the expulsion of well over 8,000 active duty servicemen and women. Unfortunately, it was too late to stop those that had already been discharged on the enlisted side of the house. And I think the Pentagon right now is in the process of trying to restore some of those who want to come back onto active duty. That's a long-winded answer to a simple question, but that's how I got involved.
Well, that restoring of those people who want to go back into the military has been met with a ton of hiccups. And there's still, I believe, just a handful who have made their way back in. So it's a very, very sad thing. But how would you define informed consent? Informed consent, just in case anyone has forgotten, informed consent was required of anybody in the military who was offered an experimental treatment, of which all the EUA vaccines, testing, and maskings were.
The EUA is, emergency use authorization, and that's what you're required to give your troops if you're giving them something that has not run through the full gamut of testing and evaluation and approval by the FDA. And to in my personal opinion, you owe them honesty. You know, if you're going to force them to take a vaccine under that scenario, you need to tell them right up front, this is emergency use, and I'm telling you that. And if hopefully, you know, we'll get your consent to do it because we think it's necessary to maintain the readiness of the force.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't do that.
Yeah.
And to me, it was smoke and mirrors. And so the federal government, starting with the commander in chief, is standing up in front of the entire nation and he's telling everybody that you take this shot, you will not get COVID. It will stop the spread of it. And then we later found out that it neither stopped the spread of it nor prevented the virus itself. And it was at that point that I stood up and said, look, I think this is patently wrong, because originally, had I been on active duty when the pandemic broke out, if I had been in my former seat as the Atlantic Area Commander, responsible for a whole fleet of ships and airplanes and boats all along the eastern seaboard, responsible for maintaining 7 by 24-hour readiness, I'd have done exactly the same thing they did. I would have said, guys, you got to line up and get it. Because I trusted the medical community. I trusted what those were in the know were telling us. And like every other shot I'd ever taken, I think at one point in time, somebody told me that, in my medical record, I had like 20 or 30 vaccines throughout my career. I never questioned one of them.
In your time in the military, did you ever see severe illness, like a like widespread illness, actually eradicated by vaccines? Did you ever see that there was, like, take the flu shot?
Right.
Everyone has been mandated to get the flu for a flu shot for a long time. Did you ever see the flu shot get eradicated in the force?
Well, if you're asking me if I ever had a force that didn't get the flu, even though they had the flu shot, the answer to that is no. I didn't track it that close. I just assumed, like most people did, that all right, if you got the shot, then fewer people will get it, and if you do get it, it won't be as bad as if you didn't get it. It was blind obedience to me, but in any event, I will tell you this. I didn't tell you right up front in the beginning of this that I was not anti-vax. I took it. I couldn't wait to get it because at the time I was over 65 years old. You're watching all of the hype on TV every night, all of the people dying, most of them elderly in my age group. And I was fearful like everybody else because that's what the media and the government wanted to happen. You need to be afraid. Go get this thing. And I did. And fortunately for my wife and I did not have any side effects. It didn't make me ill. It also didn't stop me from getting COVID. I later got it 3 times. But after that, when I found out that it was while they were still pressing hard to discharge those men and women who stood their grounds and refused to take it, that they were firing them, that made me angry. Because that was disingenuous. To me, it was a matter of ethics. They bait and switched them, said you're going to get an approved vaccine, but they didn't have the approved vaccines out there. Take this one anyway. And then we started seeing evidence of vaccine harm to a number of people in the workforce, and we started seeing the suppression of opinions that came in from other professionals in the field of medicine, like Dr. Bhattacharya. And you saw them summarily get canceled as a result of expressing those opinions. Though those guys are conspiracy theorists, they want you to believe, when in fact, all along, they were right. You saw people like Dr. Teresa Long, U.S. Army physician, who had been raising a red flag about the number of people, the number of ancillary issues and symptoms that were cropping up within the medical community, the cohort that she managed at the Army's largest training facility, aviation training facility, Fort Rucker, Alabama. And you can't ignore that stuff, in my opinion, if you're in a command seat. Once you start seeing evidence that something that you forced upon your troops might be harmful, to me, you have a duty of care to stop right there and reassess. Take a pregnant pause. Let's find out if we got this right. But they didn't do that.
Right. And how many did? I mean, almost no one. And the one of the people who did, a very high-ranking military official, at the end of 2025, so that was just 2 weeks ago, he was forced to resign. Because he failed to promote because of the way that he stood against the COVID response.
That brings to light a more recent event that I'd like to share with you. Back in the fall, I got a call one day from someone at the Pentagon invited me to attend a meeting with Secretary Hegseth and Undersecretary Tata, with a number of other people that had stood up and was fighting the same battle. And I said, well, I'd be honored to attend. And so I went to D.C. We were escorted into a room where we were to await the secretary to come in, and it was going to be a briefing. It was going to be a briefing that was going to be delivered by Casey Dixon, and a JAG officer who had stood up and stood her ground on this. And I was just one of the attendees in the room, along with Dr. Teresa Long and a number of others. And the briefing was going swimmingly well until if you can believe it or not, we were about 30, 40 minutes into it. And the secretary himself had to leave, but he had hung in there a little bit longer because he wanted to hear her finish what she was saying. And so he stayed actually longer than he was supposed to. And that guy's got a busy schedule. But right at the apex of the points that Casey was trying to deliver, a guy literally fell out with a heart attack in the back of the room. And so that broke the whole meeting into two halves. Everybody had to vacate while the EMS folks came in and dealt with him. He survived. But then when we reconvened, the secretary had already gone to his next meeting, but we're in there with General Tata, and we finished up. What was originally supposed to be a 1-hour meeting, I think went on for well over 2 hours. So they were paying attention. But we got around to Dr. Teresa Long, and she had done what I thought was a very good strategic move. She brought two service members with her. One was a medically retired female enlisted member from the Army who was sitting on the back wall. And she told her story. And after she had been forced to take the vaccine, which she didn't want to take, but took it like everybody else did to keep her job, how she had developed heart issues, and now for the rest of her life, she'd be wearing a pacemaker. They medically discharged her over that. But over in the other corner, there was a young 32-year-old Army warrant officer, an 860 pilot, whom, while he was in the middle of his training for special forces, he as an aviator, he took the shot. And he immediately started having neurological problems. And this poor guy was sitting over there in his dress blues, and he was shaking like an 85-year-old with Parkinson's disease. His whole rest of his life was ruined. And nobody's paying attention to that kind of stuff. But that's the kind of stuff that proves that the government went down the wrong path. Well, they might not have gone down the wrong path in the beginning, because I think everybody thought in their heart of hearts they were doing the right thing. My problem with them is when they found out otherwise, they didn't stop. And the other problem that I had with them is the fact that no religious exemptions were approved, other than those that were filed by people who already had approved retirement letters on file. And that's a constitutional issue, as I said before.
It's illegal. So what do we see here? We saw that the government, the military, acted illegally towards its own, and they were not willing to stop. So that brings us to a question. Should vaccines be required for the military if they cannot follow the law then? How do we expect them to follow the law in the future or even presently? So I want to give the listeners a bit of a context right here. So over the past couple of months, we've been reaching out to the Religious Liberty Commission and the Eradication of Anti-Christian Bias Task Force. These are the two entities set up by President Trump to look at the true nature of religious liberty within the United States, within the government, and to report back to him with a report and policy recommendations. And back in September, we wrote a letter to the Religious Liberty Commission encouraging them to include federal employees and military who have been affected by COVID in their hearings to give a true report on what people from the inside are actually saying. And we included some policy recommendations in there as well. And I contacted several people outside the organization to sign with us and then send it off. And Dean, you were one that we contacted to sign. And one of our policy recommendations was to end all vaccine requirements for the military. And just for this reason, if the law was not followed in terms of religious liberty rights, then how can we expect it to be followed later? And so this is the question that we are asking today. Is it right for the military to keep mandating these? And this was a sticking point for you in the letter. And so we decided to get together in front of everybody and talk about it. So explain your reasoning, why you had trouble with it.
First off, I don't believe that all vaccines are bad. I just don't. I believe that much good was derived by the vaccines that prevented malaria, the vaccines that prevented polio, et cetera, et cetera. Those were tried and they were proven. And so when you're managing a workforce like the military, first off, let's demographically look at the U.S. military. You know, there's about 330 or so million people in the United States of America. At any given time, less than 1% of that population is wearing the uniform of any one of the military services. And if you add up all of those people who have ever served in the military for any length of time, be it, 3 years or 33 years, that sum total will still add up to a little less than 8% of the total population. And so it's a unique niche. Well, people that sign up to join the armed forces are pretty much signing up and taking an oath that they're going to support and defend the Constitution and the United States of America. I read a book one time by a guy named David Grossman, and he put it this issue in perspective better than anybody I've heard yet. He said, you can divide the entire world population up into 3 groups. He says there's sheep, and the overwhelming majority of the world's population are just that. They fall in that category. They're just good, law-abiding citizens. They're not perfect, but they go to work every day. They come home. They pay their taxes. They raise their kids. They're just good people. He goes, and then there's the wolves who prey upon those sheep. And then there's the sheepdogs. Those sheepdogs are that small portion of the population who sign up and are willing to go into harm's way to protect the sheep. That's your police, that's your firefighters, that's your military men and women. And so, with that said, the reason I objected to this, exempting them from all of the shots, is because there could be, and there probably will be times, as they enter into these new eras where biological warfare is more likely than not to happen again, that we might be asking our men and women who have sworn that oath to go at risk, because if they don't go at risk, the adversaries win, and then everybody loses. That's, in a nutshell, that's my rationale for it. Sometimes, if we're going to ask you to take a bullet for your country, we might have to ask you also to take a shot for your country, even though at that time we might not know the long-term full effects of it. And it's just being truthful and honest.
Is it true that you sign away all of your rights when you enter the U.S. military?
No, you don't.
So the people who pushed back with COVID, which we both agree that what happened with COVID was unlawful, but they were the ultimate sheepdogs there. They saw that the Constitution was being violated. They knew that they had not signed away all of their rights and that their rights were being trampled on. Their religious freedoms, in particular, were being trampled on. And my question is, if nothing has been done, do you know of anything that has been done to protect the military personnel from going through a COVID again? Nothing's been done.
No, ma'am. And that was one of my issues. The whole point in going to the Pentagon with that team was to convince the secretary and the undersecretary that they have a duty of care to stand up a task force to do a full-blown after-action report on the whole rollout of this vaccine mandate on the troops. Anytime we have a major incident, a major mishap in any of the military services, there's what we call a hot wash conducted afterwards. You go back, you look at what you did, you look at what you did right, what you did wrong, and the whole point is to ascertain what mistakes did we make in this that we didn't foresee, so that we can know better the next time this is the very same thing happens. We do that all the time. Yet, in this, I'll give you a great example. After I retired, I was called up and put under contract by the Marine Corps to be a member of a senior advisory panel to look into an incident that occurred out on the West Coast, in which during a training exercise, a Marine Corps amphibious assault vehicle, which was deployed from a ship, which was to make its way to San Clemente Island where they were doing maneuvers, it sank. And 9 souls went to the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. 8 Marines and 1 sailor. And that was a significant event for them. They lost 9 souls. And it was so important to them that they stood up a whole team to look at everything that was done right or wrong, from the ship captain all the way down to the folks on scene. And after that, then they called in 6 retired admirals, 3-star and above, including me. I was the one Coast Guardsman on there, to then take a look at starting at that incident and then look at the whole amphibious mission and report back on, from a strategic standpoint, what ought we do in the future with this whole mission, not to mention how do we prevent these kinds of incidents happening again. They did all of that, and they did it within a year. Yet here we are, we had an incident that affected not just one unit, but every unit in every service in the United States military. Nobody was exempt for this. And there was a lot of missteps in it, yet nobody yet has ordered a full-blown after-action report. But that is exactly what I think the current administration is trying to undertake, albeit at a very slow bell.
Dean, you see, again, it was illegal. Why would we continue? I mean, the definition of insanity is repeating the same action over and over again. Why would we continue handing the power over to the federal government to say, we're going to break the law and give you no informed consent going into taking an experimental treatment? We're just going to shoot it in you, or we're going to get rid of you.
Right.
Are you saying this is how they should continue? It
No, I'm
doesn't
not.
matter.
No, I'm not. What I'm saying is they need to answer that question. How are we going to do it next time? Because this time didn't work. This way didn't work. And there were people harmed, and you can prove the harm to them, which studies like Dr. Teresa Long has done and is in the process of doing now. Yeah, I'm hoping that the next time, if it ever happens again, I hope it doesn't, but if it should crop its head up again, that they will look back at all of the stuff that we've learned now and put a stop to it. Now, I believe that the leaders who have to handle this next pandemic, if they're worth their salt, will take a look at this. And hopefully this stuff will be out in the open and published before the end of this year. If it's not, I will lose respect for those who promised that it would.
We will have you back on the podcast in a couple years to have this same conversation. Okay, so let's talk about biowarfare, because that was your big reason for saying you didn't agree with the statement that all that we should get rid of vaccine requirements for military.
I would think now, and all I'm doing is speculating. Okay, I mean, it's like, if you're going to write a fiction novel, I would assume now that since we know that our adversaries have biochemical weapons, and we probably do to our own sort, never seen it, never been in there. It's not one of those things they taught me in capstone, but if we are engaged in that obviously if we're going to be using biochemical weapons, that we will have already figured out an antidote for our own troops, so we're not killing our own folks. But what I'm saying is, if an adversary were to attack us with this new bioweapon that we're not prepared for, it's going to be, and the same pressure is going to be on. We got to protect not just our military, we got to protect our population as well. But in the course of doing that, we may have to ask our troops to go at some extreme risk, like we do on the battlefield, and take what we might not know is effective. But because if they don't take it, the whole nation loses. That's what I'm saying. These are hard stuff. These are the catch-22s of senior leadership. And I feel for those people that got to make those decisions. But in this particular case, hindsight's always 20/20. It always is. And one of the things that I hope that the future leaders will go back and gnaw on extensively before they pull the trigger on anything like this ever again is take a look at one specific number. It is the most important number you've never heard of. It's 0.01%. Now bring that number up because we now know, and we knew a long time ago, that for the military age cohort, that is between 18 years old and 55 years old, the chances of dying from COVID, if you got it, was less than 0.1%. Yet we force everybody to take this unapproved, unauthorized experimental vaccine. When hindsight being what it is, it was the most risk-averse decision I've ever seen the federal government make.
So, two things. Again, why do we expect, looking back, we know this, and people who didn't see it then see it
Mhm.
now, but why are we expecting the government to follow the law next time? If this, and let me say, I mean, we all know a weapon could be way worse than COVID, right? It was just like a test case. If they failed with the
Right,
test case, what is going
right.
to happen the next time? But but then you ask yourself, okay, where is the line? The government crossed the line into illegal territory this past go around. Uh, Where is the line? It's like the definition of the law is being blurred,
Right.
and we're allowing the unlawfulness to continue, and there's nothing been done to stop it.
Well, to me, you ask where's the line? To me, the line is is one of ethics, and that
But
line
they're
exists
not
where
ethical.
I know that. What I'm saying is when the federal government crosses the ethical, i.e., legal line, then they're in dangerous territory, and they need to be held accountable for that. Now, you can't blame every single commanding officer out there for following the orders issued down from higher authority to get his troops vaccinated. They weren't the real decision makers. They're just getting in line with everybody else is. But the ones up inside Washington, D.C., in the Pentagon, that kept the pedal to the metal on this are the ones, to me, that got to answer that question. They
Right, but I
crossed the
think
line. Yeah, they crossed the line, and nobody's been held accountable for it. Here was what I would hope would happen ultimately is if they conduct this after action review, and we're able to pull out all of the missteps that occurred here, that the federal government and on behalf of all of those people that are many of whom are now retired, and just say, look, we had the best intentions, but we got it wrong. We didn't know it then, but now we know better. This is what we did right. This is what we did wrong. This is what we're going to do in the future. When you grovel before the American public, when you found that you have done something wrong, they are very likely to forgive you, so long as they know that you did it with the best intentions.
I understand what you're saying about top leaders, that they're the ultimate ones held accountable, but I don't believe they're the only ones. And I know my husband is only DoD civilian, but we did see that it stopped with the commander. The commander could have chosen to not follow those particular regulations. And these
Right.
are down to very minute details. And those commanders were warned, you are breaking the law. And they did nothing. It was silence. And I mean, I
Right.
understand they probably thought they were doing the right thing. But if
Right.
they thought about it and
Right.
read the law, they would have seen they were in violation of it. And so at what point do you say, "Ugh, I'm not going to go along with this order because it's unlawful"?
It's that point where your conscience overrules what the government's trying to compel you to do. And that's why I admire those people who are willing to stand their ground. I got asked during a podcast in the middle of all of this thing, somebody asked me, as I was bringing up the issue about the abject denial of religious exemptions for all of those troops. And they asked me that it was a good question. He says, well, how do you measure um, an individual's religion, right? How do you measure that? Is it by how much money they put in the collection plate on Sunday? Is how much scripture they can quote? Is it how many times they attended Sunday school? And I go, no, I'll tell you how you measure the depth and breadth of a man or woman's faith. It is by what they're willing to give up.
That's right.
And those men and women were willing to give up careers. Many of them already had well over 15 years of active duty services. They're just a hair away from retirement. A lifelong pension with all the benefits that come along with dedicated, honorable service. And they gave that up rather than take that shot against their religious convictions. That's how you measure a person's faith. And leadership did not recognize it. They didn't acknowledge it. And we're going to force them next time, hopefully. Hopefully, I'll be long dead and gone before this ever happens again, if it happens again. But hopefully, the people will stand their ground fervently and not let this happen again.
But it is. What about the flu shot people? They're being kicked out over the flu shot. I mean, it's not even been 5 years since the mandates, and we're already kicking someone out so this one guy, Skylar Skipper, he had a reaction, a very serious reaction to his last flu shot.
Right.
And so during COVID, he put in an exemption for the flu shot, and he's currently being kicked out of the military for his refusal, both on religious and medical grounds, to take the shot. I mean,
Yeah.
so how, again, if we can't even get 5 years down the road without breaking the law
Right.
again, they denied his religious exemption.
I can't answer
Isn't it,
that.
isn't it
I just
time to
can't.
say no more?
Well, you're going to be hard to get a guy like me, a retired military guy, to stand up and say, start refusing orders. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to go down that Mark Kelly route. There's danger therein. What I would hope is that the true leaders will go back and start asking questions. All right, questions like surrounding the point that I tried to make with the 0.01%.
Absolutely.
And to me, if you're telling everybody to get the flu shot, most people comply. They do. Most people complied. I did. And if the majority of your workforce has already gotten the flu shot, they should not fear 3 or 4% who stand their ground for religious exemptions, because that's not going to take the entire Corps down. That's the kind of logic that I hope they would use, that you don't just expunge everybody, because not everybody is going to refuse to take a shot that they believe might help them.
There is scientific evidence showing you're 27% more likely to get the flu if you get the flu shot. So they're basically mandating a sick military force. But going back to your statement, you're not going to encourage people to not follow orders. Where does the order cross the line? And when you're being ordered to do something is wrong for you, like
Right.
medically. I mean, take Skylar Skipper. It could be a life-threatening deal if he took the flu shot. I mean,
Right.
he would be killing himself. So isn't that kind of against your belief to kind of commit suicide?
Well, yeah.
And they're not
And
listening?
if I were him, and I already knew I'd been advised medically that, you ought not take this thing, I wouldn't take it. And I think it's wrong to force the guy out in a situation like that. That's just patently unfair in my mind. So I'm kind of with you. I think we're in violent agreement on that.
If we're going down the same path, not even 5 years later, I mean, surely there are other routes. And this is what you said about asking questions. The military senior leaders to start asking questions. Start asking, are there alternatives? Actually, there are. And in every pandemic preparedness response team and any agency throughout any branch of government, there was always a therapeutics section. It's not just vaccines. How did we get to the point where we think everything is fixed by a vaccine? I mean, and when I talk therapeutics, I mean, you've got vitamins, you've got minerals, you've got drugs of particular kinds, and that includes hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin. You've got IVs, you've got hyperbaric oxygen, you've got monoclonal antibodies, just like we had with COVID-19. So The question is, how do we get to the point that vaccines are the only answer, especially for the military? And then you start looking at the rates of chronic disease in the military. I don't have the numbers on there, but I bet if it mirrors what's happening in the United States, those chronic disease rates are quite high.
Went down a rabbit hole right there that I can't follow you in because I just don't know anything about therapeutics. But I do know this. Um, I was always a health, minded officer. I believed in physical fitness. I believed in proper diet. Um, we served good food in their galleys, good healthy food. But there's always choices, and these young men and women, they're going to eat what they want to eat, whether we serve it to them or not. And what we do mandate though in the services is that we expect you to stay physically fit and to pass physical fitness test every so often. Beyond that, um, you got to manage your health on your own. What you're talking about here is when the government gets into managing your health via chemical insertions into your body. And I'm with you on the concerns related to that. If there are other alternatives that are proven to work, and you got people who have an explainable reason not to take it, a violation of their conscience or their religious faith, they ought not be forced to take the shot. And that's where I stand. And I've always been a strong advocate for religious freedom. And it was around the religious freedom point that I decided that I was going to stand up and fight against this whole mandate. Had they approved even 10, 15% of the request from the troops looking for a religious exemption, I wouldn't have said anything. But they didn't approve any of them. That was where they crossed the line. We can't let them do that again. And the only way you can make sure that doesn't happen again is to call that out in the open, identify it as a misstep, and put it in policy. Won't happen again.
But Dean,
This
it's
is the process.
happening. It's happening right now with the flu shot. They're requiring 100% compliance with the flu shot. They are kicking them out.
And
They're making the same mistake.
and I'm not following that. And I would encourage you to get somebody on active or somebody within the Pentagon or somebody that's in that decision chain to answer the question for you, but I can't. I'm not
I
informed
know
enough.
Casey Dixon has gone to them and
Right.
said, "You're doing this again." So I am very curious to have a conversation with her when she is done with everything at the Pentagon. Like,
Wh-
what did you find out?
When
What
she
is
can
going
talk.
on?
Yeah.
Right.
When she
And
can
so
talk.
I think these mandated shots actually pose a severe national security risk to the entire country because on the one hand, you have the risk of not you know, with the argument of bioweaponry. You
Right.
would have a bioweapon. You need to inoculate everybody to, save people. But then you've got the other side of it where you have people not joining the military because they're angry. They don't trust the military. They don't want experimental treatments put in their body against their will. So think of everybody you've lost. Only a handful of people who were kicked out over the COVID shots actually want to go back in
Right.
because they say nothing has changed. No leadership has changed. But it really, you ask yourself, is it these mandated vaccines worth the cascade of events? All of this would be taken care of if they just say, okay, you want to look at the evidence of polio and MMR and DTaP and how it has helped eradicate disease? Go ahead. Here's the evidence. Choose for yourself if you want that. Choose for yourself if you want anthrax, smallpox. You just
Right.
choose. And
Right.
if they feel, if looking at the evidence, that it actually will help them, they can take it. But if they see that it could be a great detriment to their body because they are
Right.
their body, then there you go. And you
Right.
ask yourself, how many people will actually be lost to the military that way than than actually to the disease?
Hey, look, I'm with you on informed choice. I am. And I'll also admit that, again, hindsight being what it is, had the U.S. military not done anything with COVID, I don't think we would have missed mission. All right, because it ran through the force anyway. People got COVID. They stayed out of work for however many days it took for them to come out of it and go back to the workforce. It would have it worked its way through the entire demographic like a wave, and would have been back to work in short order. All of the hair on fire shenanigans that took place surrounding this incident, again, need to be looked at and studied.
Yeah.
Um, we,
And
I will agree, we were disingenuous to those men and women who did not want to take it, particularly those ones who had vehement religious exemption objections to it, and they were denied.
right. I mean, so many people are now aware of the aborted fetal cell line that is in so
Right.
many of the shots there. So, I mean, people are heightened in their awareness of all of this. So I know the exemptions are picking up. Um, I did I did want to say, going back to what you said earlier about, military leaders really should be looking at studying. Okay, where is the health? How is the health of the military force? And it makes you wonder, okay, where are the studies that show that all of these shots combined actually lead to a healthy force? They have to have that data. And I know that Teresa Long is looking at that within the Pentagon right now. But it does make you wonder, have all of these shots created a healthier human?
Hey, all I can say is I wish I could type that question into Perplexity, and Perplexity would give me an answer to it. But I don't think anybody knows the answer to that question yet, so I can't speculate on it. But I want to
I
know
think
just as much as you do.
I think until that answer is questioned, really, they need to end all vaccine mandates within the military. And I wanted to bring up another thing. Actually, we were talking on the phone about this, but looking far into the future, and this is another national security issue, you have all the little Davids of the world. Little David is my 5-year-old son. He's
Mhm.
bright-eyed, he's bushy-tailed, he is so ready to conquer, very clear-eyed because he's never had a shot in him. Is he going to be denied entry to the military? And he's going to be smart and strong and perfect for military life someday because he's going to need some structure. But is he going to be denied access to military life because of his religious beliefs?
It's very possible. If he's going to refuse to take any vaccines, which has been part of military requirements for service for decades now, it's a conscious choice he'll have to make. I wish that weren't so. I really do. But I don't see that going away anytime soon. Um, we want the Davids of the world, the healthy ones. We want people, and I particularly want to see as many strong people of the Judeo-Christian faith in the service as we can get, because I think they're the ones that form the basis of a moral foundation. And to erode that foundation, to me, erodes the quality of the entire service. So these are great questions for future leaders, future lawyers, future doctors to wrangle over. And as you and I well know, during the last 4 years, during the last administration, our efforts to recruit enough qualified men and women to serve in the armed forces were failing. And finally, for whatever reasons, the gates opened up again and they're coming in droves. And I'm, and I wouldn't advocate pushing anything on them. Once we have an awareness that it could potentially be harmful for them, we should not be pushing it on them. But I'm not in a position to say what's harmful and what isn't because I'm not a doctor. As a result of this whole handling of the government handling of the COVID-19 vaccine issue, I've lost faith. I've lost faith and trust in that aspect of the government. And I won't take another COVID shot. All right. I won't take another flu shot either because of that. I got to trust what they tell me that it's going to do or not do is actually true. And they got to regain, the leaders in the country, the present and future, has got to make a concerted effort to regain that lost trust with the troops. And right now, since in the last few years, the most trusted institution in the United States of America, that is the U.S. military as an institution, has lost ground significantly. And it's not just the way the mandate was handled. It was over the withdrawal from Afghanistan, et cetera. But we're starting to regain that. If we can get this right, if we can finish an after-action report, own it, acknowledge it, promise we won't let those missteps happen again, that trust will be renewed. I'm certain of it. But we just got to have leaders willing to conduct the analysis.
So you said you're not a doctor. The military leaders are not doctors either.
Right.
So, in fact, the doctors are saying, don't take the shot. Many are now. Why not leave it up to the individual to choose for themselves? Because we don't know.
All right. I'm perfectly fine with that. Not my decision to make, though. I would like to be, if I was on active duty again, sitting in that seat, that's what I would push for. Until somebody can prove that the whole force would be taken offline as a result of not doing it. But in this particular case, nobody can say that. Nobody can prove that. Again, going back, 0.01%.
Let me ask you the last question I like to ask everybody. If the average American citizen could do one thing to combat the corruption that they see in our country, what would it be?
Be a Nathan. There's a story in the Bible for those people of the Judeo-Christian belief that it describes when David was king. He had gone off the reservation and he had committed adultery and with the wife of one of his soldiers, and he was trying to hide it. He tried to make it go away, and ultimately he ended up sending the poor soldier to the front lines to be killed. So now he's guilty of both adultery and murder. And he had gotten so high and mighty, like so many people in power, that he thought that he could cover that up, that nobody would know. But there was this one prophet named Nathan, who had the courage to confront the leader. And he did that at great risk. What we're lacking in today's society, I think, and I know it occurs in the military, is we don't have people who are willing to confront those in power with their own misgivings and misdoings. So we need to grow people that are willing to speak truth to power, to get them to see the error of their own ways, because a lot of them continue to believe that they're right until somebody dares prove them wrong. And in King David's case, he hit his knees. and he became a man after God's own heart, and he was forgiven. Now, he was held accountable, but he was forgiven. I love that story. We need to grow more Nathans in the world. That's it. That's my answer.
That's one of the best answers I've heard. That's excellent, Dean. Thank you so much for joining me today. It was a pleasure, and I am totally inviting you back onto the podcast in a couple of years to talk about how all of this has played out.
Well, I look forward to that conversation.
Thank you, Dean, so much for coming on.
Okay, thank you. God bless you.
Thanks so much for tuning in. Please like, comment, subscribe to, and share these podcasts. I'll see you here next week.